They said she was crazy. They laughed when they saw her walking through the dusty streets of the small town, her long tangled hair flying in the wind, and her clothes patched together like a scarecrow. They called her the Warthog Witch, a name meant to scare her away, but she never seemed to notice. People whispered stories about her in hushed tones, claiming she could curse anyone who crossed her path, or worse, that she had strange, magical powers that could make the impossible happen. For years, the townspeople avoided her, tossing mocking glances whenever she passed. Kids dared each other to run past her house at night, their hearts pounding with fear and excitement. Local farmers swore they heard weird sounds coming from her barn scratches, whispers, and sometimes an eerie low growl that seemed almost human. And yet, no one truly understood her. No one knew what she was capable of. Until that day, it all started on a hot summer afternoon. The town square was crowded, the sun baking the ground and laughter ringing through the air. The Warthog Witch appeared, as usual, carrying an old, battered suitcase and muttering under her breath. The townspeople chuckled and shook their heads. They didn't know what she was mumbling, but it didn't sound like anything good. They mocked her again, throwing insults and daring her to leave. She just smiled, calm, unbothered almost, knowing something they didn't. Then came the roar sound that made everyone freeze. At first, they thought it was thunder, but it was too fast, too sharp. Eyes turned to the sky, and that's when the impossible happened. Out of nowhere, an A-10 aircraft, its engines screaming, plummeted from the clouds like a falling star aimed straight at the town. People screamed and scattered, their laughter replaced by pure terror. And there she was, standing in the middle of the square, unshaken, watching it all unfold. Her eyes glinted with something the townspeople had never seen before: power, revenge, and a warning that nobody could ignore. No one knew how she did it, or why. Some said it was magic. Others swore it was a coincidence. But one thing was certain: the Warthog, which was not someone to be underestimated. And as the smoke rose in the distance and sirens blared, the question on everyone's mind was the same. What would she do next? No one knew where the Warthog Witch had come from. Some said she had lived on the outskirts of town for as long as anyone could remember, like a shadow that never left. Others claimed she had appeared out of nowhere, carried by the wind or some strange fate, and that the land itself seemed to bend around her presence. People remembered stories passed down from their grandparents' strange happenings: livestock disappearing, mysterious lights in the woods, but no one dared investigate too closely. Despite the fear, there were hints of her humanity too. Late at night, some townspeople swore they saw her leaving bundles of firewood or food at the doors of those who were sick or alone. Children sometimes caught glimpses of her humming softly while tending to a wounded animal or talking to birds that followed her wherever she went. Yet those same people would warn their friends, "Don't get too close. She's not like us." And now, after the A-10 fell, her mystery had deepened tenfold. Authorities scrambled to understand what had happened, helicopters circling above and emergency crews rushing toward the smoke. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was it an accident? A secret military test gone wrong? Or was it something else, something only the Warthog Witch could explain? No one had a clear answer, and the fear that had once been quiet mocking had grown into something tangible, something sharp in the pit of the stomach. Even the bravest townsfolk couldn't shake the feeling that everything they thought they knew about their quiet little town was about to change. The Warthog Witch didn't run from the chaos. She seemed to feed on it, her eyes scanning the horizon, waiting, almost patient. And in that moment, everyone realized that the laughter of the past had been dangerously naive. But one question lingered, whispered in every trembling voice: what would happen if she decided to take matters into her own hands? Nobody in town really knew how the Warthog Witch had learned her strange abilities, and nobody dared ask. Some older folks whispered about a time when she had been a normal girl, living quietly at the edge of the forest until something or someone changed her. They said she spent long nights wandering the woods, talking to creatures that weren't quite animals, learning secrets that no ordinary human should know. Others claimed she had been cursed or maybe blessed, with a power that made the world around her unpredictable, dangerous, and yet mesmerizing. Her presence had always made people uneasy. Even when she didn't speak, she seemed to command attention. The way she moved, the way her eyes followed you without blinking it, felt like she could see everything inside you. Children both feared and admired her, and the adults. Well, the adults never stopped laughing until now. The crash had changed something. The mocking voices had gone quiet, replaced with uneasy whispers and stolen glances toward the forest. Where she lived, people began noticing strange signs in the days after the A-10 fell. Crows circling high in the sky, sudden gusts of wind that carried a faint, smoky scent, and flickering lights in the windows of the old barn where she kept to herself. Some swore they saw her walking toward the crash site, carrying nothing but a satchel and a calm, unreadable expression. Her presence seemed to warp the ordinary, bending reality just enough to make people question what was real. And yet, for all the fear and rumors, no one had truly confronted her. They didn't know her motives, and more importantly, they didn't know the limits of her power. Every eye in town now wondered the same thing. If she could make an A-10 fall from the sky, what else could she do? And as night fell and shadows stretched long across the streets, the Warthog Witch disappeared into the woods, leaving a town full of questions and no answers. The town had changed overnight. Windows were shuttered, doors bolted, and the streets eerily quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath. Rumors spread faster than ever. Some said the Warthog Witch was preparing something. Others whispered that she had been planning this moment for years. Farmers claimed their animals acted strange, refusing to leave the barns, eyes wide and ears twitching as if they could sense danger before it arrived. Even the wind seemed different, sharp, cold, carrying whispers that no one could quite understand in the middle of it all. The Warthog Witch moved like a shadow through the forest, unseen but felt. The air seemed to bend around her, the trees leaning toward her path as if obeying some unspoken command. People who dared to peek from their windows reported strange lights and fleeting shapes darting across the darkened woods, accompanied by low, rumbling sounds that set teeth on edge. Nobody dared go near, but curiosity gnawed at them, fear mixing with a strange, unwilling fascination. And then the first sign appeared. A flash in the sky, sudden and blinding, followed by a low, guttural roar that rattled windows and made the very ground tremble. Animals scattered, the wind screamed through the streets, and people clutched each other, too terrified to run or even speak. The Warthog Witch emerged at the edge of town, her figure stark against the flickering light, eyes glowing faintly. A calm contrast to the chaos building around her. Voices inside houses whispered the same question. What was she capable of? And deep down, everyone knew this was no accident. Whatever had started with the A-10 falling from the sky was only the beginning. Something bigger, darker, and more unpredictable was about to happen. The air itself felt charged, electric with anticipation, as though the town teetered on the edge of a storm it could never escape. And then she raised her arms. The wind intensified. The ground shivered. Every heartbeat in town seemed to echo the same truth. The Warthog Witch was no longer just a shadowy figure of fear. Just as the townspeople were beginning to catch their breath, thinking perhaps the worst had already happened, a new sound split the air deep, mechanical hum that no one could place. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an engine. It was something else entirely, something alive and pulsing, and it seemed to come from the very ground beneath their feet. People stumbled from their hiding places, eyes wide as tremors ran through the streets. The Warthog Witch didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if she had expected this all along. Then the second twist revealed itself. From the smoke of the fallen A-10, a figure began to emerge, not human, but something almost machine, almost organic, its form twisting and glowing as if it were alive. Sparks flew from its frame, and a strange, low growl vibrated through the air. The townspeople realized with a sinking feeling that the crash had not been a random accident. Something had been waiting, lying in ambush, and the Warthog Witch had known it. Fear turned into panic. Windows slammed, doors locked, and people ran in every direction, but there was nowhere to hide. The sky darkened as heavy clouds rolled in unnaturally fast, shadows stretching long across the town, and the strange hum grew louder, almost deafening. And still, the witch didn't move. She raised her arms higher, muttering words that no one could understand. Her voice carried on the electric wind. It sounded like a warning, or perhaps a command, and the ground itself seemed to respond. Whispers spread through the terrified crowd. Had the Warthog Witch caused the first crash to lure this creature? Was this her doing, or was it something she intended to control? Every instinct screamed danger. Every eye was fixed on her. And yet no one could tell if she was the threat or the only hope. The town teetered on the edge of chaos. The A-10 wreckage smoldered. The creature advanced, and the witch's power radiated through the air like lightning ready to strike. In that frozen moment, one terrifying truth became clear. No one in the town was safe, and the next move hers or the creature's would change everything forever. The creature lunged forward, its metallic limbs clanging against the ground, sparks flying as it moved with terrifying precision. The townspeople froze, paralyzed by fear, as the hum in the air turned into a deafening roar. Smoke swirled around the fallen A-10, hiding the creature's full form. But its glowing eyes were impossible to miss, eyes that seemed to see straight into the heart of the town, into the heart of everyone who had mocked the Warthog Witch. And then she acted. The Warthog Witch stepped forward, her hands raised, her voice rising above the chaos in a chant that sent shivers down every spine. The wind bent, twisting violently around her, and suddenly the ground beneath the creature shook. Sparks erupted from its limbs, its growls turning into high-pitched screeches as it struggled to move. The witch's eyes glowed brighter, and in an instant, the impossible happened. The creature stopped, frozen mid-step, as if time itself had paused. The townspeople stared in disbelief. What they had feared was now being controlled by the very person they had ridiculed for years. Slowly, carefully, the Warthog Witch lowered her arms. The creature collapsed to the ground, sparks fading, its threat neutralized but not destroyed. She turned to the crowd, her expression unreadable. And for the first time, the town saw something they hadn't expected. A glimmer of mercy, and perhaps a warning, just as relief began to settle. A deep rumble came from the wreckage of the A-10. Smoke cleared to reveal something even more shocking. The cockpit had been empty. There was no pilot, no evidence of a crash caused by accident or enemy. The town realized in horror that the Warthog Witch hadn't just stopped the creature, she had orchestrated everything. The A-10, the fall, the chaos, it had all been part of a plan far bigger than anyone could imagine. And as she disappeared back into the forest, leaving the townspeople trembling, one chilling truth lingered in the air. The Warthog Witch was not done, and whatever her next move would be, it would change their world forever. The town slowly began to breathe again, though the memory of the chaos lingered like smoke in the air. Windows reopened, doors unbolted, and cautious steps returned to the streets. People whispered among themselves, replaying the events in disbelief A-10 that fell from the sky. The mysterious creature and the Warthog Witch who had both terrified and saved them. Fear had not vanished completely, but it had shifted into something different: respect, awe, and a quiet understanding that some things were beyond explanation. No one dared approach the witch's home at the edge of the forest, yet everyone could feel her presence. Farmers found their livestock calmer than ever, as if some unseen force was watching over them. Children, who had once dared each other to run past her house, now left small gifts at the forest's edge: apples, shiny stones, little notes hoping for a glimpse or perhaps a simple acknowledgement. It was clear to everyone that the Warthog Witch was more than the rumors and jokes the town had once clung to. She was a force of nature, unpredictable and powerful, but not cruel. The questions that had haunted the townspeople: how the A-10 had fallen, why the creature had appeared, and why she had chosen this moment, remained partially unanswered, but in a strange way that only added to the story of their town. They realized that sometimes the extraordinary defies reason, and respect for the unknown was just as important as caution. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the trees, some claimed they could see her silhouette, watching over the town, waiting for the next challenge. The Warthog Witch had left a lasting mark, a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that those who are laughed at often hold the greatest power, and that sometimes the line between fear and awe is thinner than anyone could imagine. The town would never forget, and neither would they ever look at the world the same way again.